You know, we talk a lot about strength in our culture, especially when it comes to men. But let's be clear, strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how well you can hide your feelings. Real strength, the kind that makes women feel safe, seen, and deeply connected, is about emotional courage. Women love strong men, not because they're invincible, but because they're willing to be vulnerable without giving up their integrity. Let's dismantle the old narrative that says strength is stoic, that being a real man means pushing pain down and pretending everything's fine. That's not strong. That's survival. Strength is when a man can sit with a woman in her heartbreak, not fix it, just hold space for it. Strength is when he leads with empathy, not ego. Women are not drawn to perfection, they are drawn to presence. And here's the truth that'll shake the foundation of how we've been taught. A strong man can cry. A strong man can say, I don't know. A strong man can apologize and mean it. We love strong men because they are the ones brave enough to face themselves. They are the ones who choose connection over control, truth over toughness, and love over armor. So if you're a man wondering what it means to be strong in this world, know this: your willingness to show up fully, especially when it's hard, is the most magnetic thing you can offer. We live in a world that has, for generations, defined strength in the most narrow, unhelpful way. We're taught that to be strong is to never flinch, to never waver, to keep emotions locked up tight like a vault, sealed and silent. That's what many men are raised to believe. And the message is loud. If you feel, you're weak. If you hurt, you're fragile. If you cry, you're broken. But here's what I've seen, studied, and learned through years of research and real-life stories. That kind of strength is hollow. It's brittle. It breaks under pressure, and it leaves people, especially the men who cling to it, feeling isolated, exhausted, and afraid of being fully seen. What women are drawn to isn't the man who never sheds a tear. It's the man who has the courage to face his feelings, even when it terrifies him. It's the man who stands in the middle of emotional chaos, not to dominate it, but to understand it. That's real strength. Emotional courage isn't soft. It's seismic. It shakes the ground under old ideas of masculinity. It says, I'm willing to be open here. I'm willing to let you in, even if I might get hurt. That kind of strength changes the entire landscape of a relationship, because when a man has the courage to be emotionally honest, it gives the people around him permission to do the same. And that is where intimacy begins. Emotional courage is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of integrity in the face of fear. It's the decision to be truthful over being impressive. It's saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here. I'm not checking out. That level of showing up, especially when it's easier to shut down, is magnetic. You can feel it in the room. You can feel it in your bones. And women, let me tell you something. We don't want the man who always has a solution. We want the man who can sit in the tension without shutting down. We want the man who sees emotional honesty not as weakness, but as wisdom. This doesn't mean men have to overshare or spill their pain everywhere. No, that's not emotional courage. That's a lack of boundaries. Emotional courage means being honest with yourself first. It's saying something's coming up for me. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to stay with it. It's being willing to feel instead of numb. It's reaching for connection instead of control. That kind of inner work, it's brave and it's rare, because the world doesn't always reward men for being emotionally aware. In fact, it often punishes them. But the strongest men I've ever met are the ones who keep showing up anyway. There is nothing more powerful than a man who knows how to regulate his nervous system, who knows how to breathe through his triggers instead of react from them. That's strength. There is nothing more commanding than a man who can say, I'm feeling anger, but I know it's covering up something deeper. Let me figure out what that is before I speak. That's the kind of strength that builds safety. That's the kind of strength that builds trust. And in a world where so many of us are just trying to feel safe in someone's presence, that kind of emotional responsibility is everything. And here's the part that flips the narrative. Emotional courage isn't just about handling your own stuff. It's about how you hold space for others. When a man can say to his partner, "Tell me what you're feeling. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to listen," he becomes a source of grounding. That moment right there is what so many women crave, not because they're helpless, not because they can't handle their emotions, but because they want a partner who can be a witness to their humanity without making it about himself. That's real leadership. That's strength in action. We've been sold a lie that emotional expression and masculinity can't coexist. But I've seen the opposite. Some of the strongest, most grounded, most trustworthy men I've ever known are the ones who cry when they're overwhelmed with love or grief, who apologize when they mess up, who lean in when things get uncomfortable. These men don't have less strength. They have more, because it takes everything in you to stay present when your instincts are screaming, "Run!" It takes grit to be soft in a world that tells you to be hard. And it takes an unshakable kind of integrity to love deeply when you know that love also opens you up to loss. We are hardwired for connection, not performance. Yet so many men have been taught, either directly or indirectly, that in order to be loved, they have to perform. They have to be perfect. They have to get it right every time, be bulletproof, be the provider, the protector, the fixer, the stoic. And that's exhausting. It's also unsustainable because perfection isn't real. It's a myth sold to us by a culture that's terrified of real, raw, messy humanity. Women do not fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with presence. And presence isn't about being flawless. It's about being fully there. When a man is trying to be perfect, he's not actually present. He's in his head, managing his image, calculating how to say the right thing, be the right kind of strong, mask the insecurity he feels underneath. That kind of mental gymnastics might protect his pride, but it builds walls between hearts. Because connection doesn't happen in perfection. It happens in the cracks. It happens when a man says, "I'm scared, I'll disappoint you, but I want to be here anyway." It happens when he's willing to stay instead of perform. That's when we feel safe. That's when we trust him. That's when love deepens. There's a difference between impressing someone and impacting them. Perfection impresses from a distance, but presence leaves a mark on your soul. Presence says, "I'm with you in this moment," not trying to get it over with or get it right, but just here, really here. It's eye contact that doesn't dart away when things get hard. It's body language that leans in when emotions get loud. It's the man who isn't distracted by his own fear of being enough, because he knows that being there matters more than being perfect. That kind of presence is unforgettable. One of the deepest truths I've learned is that intimacy isn't built in the big polished moments. It's built in the quiet, unfiltered ones. It's in the way someone listens when you're falling apart. It's in the way they sit next to you without needing to fix the silence. It's in the way they let you be messy without trying to wrap it all up with a bow. Women aren't asking men to be superhuman. They're asking for attunement, to be seen, heard, felt, to have their emotional reality acknowledged, not managed. And the man who can do that imperfectly but consistently is the man who becomes unforgettable. There's an anxiety that lives in the pursuit of perfection. It's subtle, but it's always humming underneath the surface. It says, you're only as valuable as your last win, your last fix, your last success. And that anxiety spills into relationships. It makes a man unavailable, not because he doesn't care, but because he's too wrapped up in trying not to fail. Presence, on the other hand, is calm. Doesn't need to hustle for worth. It just is. And when a man stands in that grounded presence, he becomes the kind of partner who doesn't just do love, he embodies it. I've sat with countless women in my research and my life who said some version of this. I don't need him to say the right thing. I just need him to be there with me, not above me, not outside of the moment, not fixing it, just with me. That's what presence gives us. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, it doesn't get applause, but it's everything. It's what makes women feel emotionally safe, deeply valued, and profoundly respected. Because when a man chooses presence over perfection, he's saying, you matter more than my image. This moment matters more than my ego. So many men underestimate their power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that grounds and heals. The kind that says, you're not alone. I'm with you. That power doesn't come from polished words or flawless behavior. It comes from presence, from a man's willingness to be real instead of right, to stay when it's uncomfortable, to listen when it's inconvenient. That's not weakness. That's strength in its most human form. And the more we embrace that truth, the more we move toward the kind of relationships that don't just survive, they transform us. We are living in a time where ego has been mistaken for leadership, control has been mistaken for strength, and emotional unavailability has been branded as desirable. But women in the deepest parts of themselves don't want to be overpowered. They want to be understood. What they are drawn to is not dominance, but depth, not bravado, but belonging. And the bridge that carries us from ego to connection is empathy. Not the soft, vague kind that just says, I feel bad for you, but the grounded, embodied kind that says, I'm going to sit with you in this without needing to take center stage. Ego walks into a conversation needing to win. Empathy walks in ready to witness. Ego hears to reply. Empathy listens to understand, and there is such profound beauty in a man who chooses empathy over ego, not because he has nothing to prove, but because he finally understands that proving himself is not the point. Empathy is not passive. It is not about rolling over or becoming silent. It is an act of radical courage to put your own defenses down long enough to truly enter someone else's emotional world. That is the essence of connection, and it is the heartbeat of strong, lasting love. One of the most damaging myths we carry is the idea that strength in a man means emotional detachment, that to love like a man means staying above the emotional current rather than stepping into it. But what I've seen over and over again is that the men who cultivate empathy, the men who can look a woman in the eye and say, that makes sense. I can see why you'd feel that way. Those men are not weak. They are deeply powerful because they have learned to quiet their ego long enough to make room for someone else's truth. Women don't want perfect responses. They don't want emotionally distant heroes. They want partnership. And partnership isn't built in logic. It's built in emotional reciprocity. When a woman opens up, shares her fears, her doubts, her hurt, and all she receives is a logical fix or a detached nod, something closes. A door shuts quietly inside her. But when she's met with genuine curiosity, with I want to understand this better, everything changes. That's the power of empathy. It doesn't fix pain, it validates it. It says you matter enough for me to slow down and care. Ego, on the other hand, is impatient. It wants resolution, not reflection. It wants control, not connection. It interrupts. It judges. It turns conflict into a scoreboard, and in doing so, it pushes people away. Women don't feel safe when they're in constant competition with a man's ego. They don't feel cherished when they're constantly being corrected or talked over. But they come alive when they feel seen. And the man who can let go of needing to be right in order to be present, that man becomes unforgettable because he understands the sacredness of being a witness, not just a warrior. Empathy softens hard moments. It diffuses tension. It says, I hear you and I care, not because I agree with every detail, but because you matter to me. That kind of attunement is rare. It's not taught in locker rooms or boardrooms. It's not praised in action movies or on magazine covers. But it is what keeps relationships from unraveling. It's what turns arguments into deeper understanding instead of deeper wounds. A man who leans into empathy is a man who chooses connection, even when his ego is screaming to take control. And that choice, over time, is what builds emotional intimacy and trust. When a man chooses empathy, he's not abandoning his strength. He's refining it. He's saying, my power is not in how loud I speak or how right I am. My power is in how safe people feel around me. That's legacy work. That's soul level impact. It shows up as flashy or dramatic. It shows up as consistent presence, as the kind of love that can hold space for someone else's fear without making it about his own insecurity. Women love strong men, not because they're always composed or always confident, but because they're committed to meeting others where they are, and that starts with empathy, not ego. There's a certain kind of man who walks into a room and doesn't need to take it over. He doesn't puff up. He doesn't shrink. He doesn't perform or posture. He just is grounded, present. And when you're near him, you feel it, not in your head, but in your body. You feel calm. You feel open. You feel safe. That's not an accident. That's not luck. That's inner work made visible. And that's the kind of man women are drawn to, not because he dominates the space, but because he anchors it. We live in a world where so many people are performing safety without ever cultivating it. Safety isn't something you say, it's something you create. And the kind of safety women crave in a relationship isn't about being physically protected from the outside world. It's about being emotionally protected inside the relationship. Can she be herself without being judged? Can she speak freely without walking on eggshells? Can she cry without being told to calm down? Can she be silent without being pushed to explain? The men who create that kind of space, they're not just loved, they're trusted. A man becomes emotionally safe not by being perfect, but by being consistent. He becomes safe when his reactions are predictable, not explosive. When his words match his actions, when his presence is steady, even when life is messy. Safety comes from reliability, and reliability comes from self-awareness. A man who knows his own emotional terrain, his triggers, his edges, his limits, is a man who won't unload that terrain onto someone else. He holds himself accountable, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. That's safety. That's emotional maturity. That's the foundation of intimacy. Women are perceptive. They know the difference between a man who listens to respond and one who listens to understand. They can feel when someone is physically present but emotionally absent. They've learned, often the hard way, that just because a man is quiet doesn't mean he's safe. Safety isn't silence. Safety is presence. It's attunement. It's the man who looks at her and doesn't just see a problem to solve or a story to endure, but a person to connect with. That moment when a woman feels truly seen, not scanned, not judged, not fixed, but seen, is unforgettable. And it's important to say this. Creating safety doesn't mean a man has to abandon his boundaries or avoid conflict. Safe men do have hard conversations. They do say no when they need to, but they say it with clarity, not cruelty, with care, not control. Safety isn't about making everyone comfortable. It's about making everyone feel respected. There's a difference. And when a man holds space for difficult emotions without defensiveness, when he owns his part of the conversation without blame or withdrawal, what he's really saying is, you can trust me with your heart. So many men want to be respected. They want to be admired. They want to be loved. But they forget that safety is the soil where all of that grows. Without it, everything wilts. Without it, love becomes survival. And survival is not connection. The men who are truly seen, the ones women remember, the ones women open up to, build lives with, build legacies with, are the ones who put in the work to be emotionally responsible. They don't just show up when it's convenient. They stay when it's hard. That kind of presence carves out space for others to breathe, to feel, and to trust. At the heart of all this is something beautifully simple. Women feel most connected to the men who make them feel safe enough to be themselves. Not idealized, not edited, not reduced to roles, but fully, messily, wonderfully themselves. And that kind of safety doesn't come from charm or charisma. It comes from emotional availability, from the willingness to sit with discomfort, to navigate conflict with grace, to hold space without making it about you. When a man becomes a safe place to land, he doesn't just win someone's affection, he earns their respect. And that, more than anything, is what lasting connection is built on. There's a script so many men are handed early on, whether it's by family, culture, media, or survival, that says, if you want to be chosen, be impressive, be the best, be strong, smooth, successful. Don't let them see you unsure. Don't let them see you need. Don't let them see you real. And what begins as an innocent attempt to win love quickly turns into a lifelong performance. One that's so exhausting, so hollow, that somewhere along the line, the man forgets who he is beneath the act. He becomes more invested in being chosen than in being known. But here's the truth. Women don't fall in love with the act. They fall in love with the authenticity that lives underneath it. Performance might attract attention, but depth sustains connection. There's a difference between being wanted and being felt. There's a difference between being admired and being truly known. Women don't want a man who shines so brightly on the surface that no light can reach what's underneath. They want someone who's willing to take the armor off, put the mask down and say, here's who I am when no one's watching. That's where intimacy begins, in the cracks, in the questions, in the unpolished places where real character lives. And the truth is, there's a cost to performance. It builds walls. It creates a version of masculinity that looks confident, but is actually built on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being seen. Performance says, if I can just keep up this image, maybe I'll be loved. Depth says, if I show up fully, even when I'm unsure, maybe I'll be understood. The difference between the two isn't in the level of effort, it's in the level of courage. And women can feel it. We feel when a man is giving us access to his heart and when he's hiding behind his highlight reel. What women crave is emotional honesty, not perfection, not polish, not performance, just honesty. Can you own your fear without covering it up with anger? Can you admit you're hurting without needing to protect your pride? Can you sit in discomfort without reaching for a distraction? That's depth. And it doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from letting go. Letting go of the need to always be the fixer, letting go of the idea that masculinity is about stoicism, letting go of the performance that says, I'm struggling, even when everything inside you says, I'm struggling. Depth also means being willing to engage below the surface. When you ask a woman how she's doing, can you actually hold the answer if it's complicated? Can you stay in the room when emotions come up, hers or your own? Can you follow her into the vulnerable places without trying to lead or rescue or redirect? Women don't need a man to save them. They need a man who can see them, who can meet them in their emotional depth without flinching or fleeing. That's how trust is built. That's how safety is earned. That's how love becomes transformational instead of transactional. We're not looking for men who are always right. We're looking for men who are always real, who can laugh at themselves, who can say, I don't know, but I want to understand, who can be curious about their own inner world. Depth isn't always dramatic. It's often quiet, still, reflective, but it's felt deeply. It resonates in conversation. It's present in the way a man holds space, asks questions, and makes people feel like they can exhale around him. A man who isn't performing is a man people trust. Because if you can be honest with yourself, you can be honest with us. There's nothing more magnetic than a man who has done the work to know himself, who doesn't need to pretend, who brings his full humanity into the relationship, not just the parts he thinks will impress or attract. Because here's the radical truth. Depth is the new sexy. Vulnerability is power. And the more we dismantle the myth that women want the strongest, smoothest, smartest guy in the room, the more space we make for something real to happen, something lasting, something rooted in truth, not performance. And when that happens, that's when love stops being a stage and starts becoming home. Somewhere along the way, we confused silence with strength. We started to tell boys and then expect of men that if they were truly strong, they wouldn't speak about what hurt, that real men don't cry, that real men keep it together, that real men carry it all on their shoulders and never let it show. But here's what I've learned. Silence is not strength, it's armor. And that armor doesn't just protect men from being hurt, it blocks them from being known. It builds walls inside relationships. And eventually it becomes a prison. Real strength doesn't come from stuffing your feelings down so far that they become unrecognizable. Real strength is when a man can say, this is hard, and I'm still here. It's when he can name what he's feeling without fear of being less than. It's when he can choose truth over image, connection over control. There's a courage in speaking up about what's real that silence will never give you. Because silence might keep you safe in the short term, but in the long run, it erodes intimacy. It keeps people at arm's length, even the people who love you most. Women don't want a man who never flinches. They want a man who can feel, who can show up in the hard conversations, who can let them into the emotional reality beneath the surface. That doesn't mean emotional chaos. It doesn't mean oversharing everything. It means honesty. It means presence. It means a man who has the emotional language to say, I'm not okay right now, instead of disappearing into work, shutting down, or lashing out. Silence is often misunderstood as control, but what it really is disconnection. And I'll tell you this, there is nothing more frustrating than trying to love someone who won't let you in. A man who meets every concern with, I'm fine, who shrugs off every vulnerable moment, who won't let himself be seen, that doesn't feel strong, it feels far away. And when women say they want a strong man, they don't mean stoic. They mean secure. Secure enough to speak. Secure enough to stay open, even when it's uncomfortable. Secure enough to stop pretending and start participating in the emotional work of real connection. Strong doesn't mean having all the answers. It doesn't mean never breaking down. Strong means telling the truth, especially when it's hard. It means saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to try. Or even, I need help. That kind of strength is raw, it's humble, it's human. And when a man stands in that space, the entire dynamic of a relationship shifts. It invites softness, it invites trust, it makes it safe for her to be real too. Because when a man risks being emotionally open, it creates a ripple effect. It gives permission for more truth to enter the room. And we need more of that kind of strength, not just in our homes, but in our communities, in our conversation, in the way we raise sons and partner with each other. The kind of strength that doesn't silence fear, but walks through it. That doesn't deny pain, but holds space for it. That doesn't pretend to be invulnerable, but embraces vulnerability as a path to deeper connection. Silence might look strong from the outside, but when you're in a relationship with it, it feels like absence. And love doesn't grow in absence. It grows in presence, in expression, in truth. So no, strong doesn't mean silent. Strong means engaged. It means emotionally available. It means seen. And the men who have the courage to speak, not just to be heard, but to be known, those are the men women love deeply, because it's not about being unshakable. It's about being reachable. It's not about performing masculinity. It's about living humanity. And that kind of strength, the kind that holds both power and tenderness, is what love, real love, has always needed. So if you're a man wondering what it means to be strong in a world that keeps sending you mixed messages, let me tell you this. Strength isn't about being the loudest in the room, the toughest in the fight, or the most put together on the outside. It's about being rooted. It's about being real. It's about choosing courage over comfort again and again. And women, real women, don't want the version of you that's curated, polished, and disconnected. They want the version of you that's alive, attuned, and willing to do the work. Because in the end, strength that's performative doesn't hold up. But strength that's embodied, that's the stuff that love, leadership, and legacy are built on. The kind of strength that says, you can count on me, not because I have all the answers, but because I'm not going anywhere. That is what makes women feel safe. That is what makes them feel seen. And that is what makes them stay. So peel back the armor, step into the discomfort, lead with presence, not perfection. You don't have to be everything. Just be authentic. Be the man who does the inner work. Be the man who listens. Be the man who can hold space without needing to fill it with solutions. That man, he doesn't just earn love, he becomes unforgettable. Because the truth is, when a woman finds a strong man, not the kind that hides behind ego, but the kind who shows up with depth, empathy, and grounded love, she knows, and she doesn't forget.